Hello. Thank you so much for being here. Well, thanks for that. I guess I shouldn't tell you that our guests aren't here, it's just me, but I'm not going to tell you that. Our special guests will be out in just a moment. But first of all, I want to thank for their generous sponsorship of this event, Walters. And of course, it's a very bittersweet moment for us because Ken Schindler was a great friend of ours and passed away unexpectedly just recently. And we miss him a lot. He was a great friend. And I always remember him telling me after, he said, I start to sit and say I'm going to go back to my booth, but then I get so involved in what's going on that I just have to stay. He was a great guy. I hope if you knew him, you understand what I meant. Fortunately, his son Adam has taken on the responsibility of the company, and so we thank Adam for the sponsorship of this event, and very grateful that he's upholding the tradition. Adam, could you stand? Or oh, he's in the back? There he is. So, it is now my great honor to introduce two hospitality icons, and I think one of Las Vegas's most notable power couples. This is a rare and distinguished pleasure because Mr. Wynn does not do this very often, I'm told, if ever, and Roger rarely does, and the fact that they're both here together is a singular event. So please welcome Steve Wynn.
Back behind you. Right behind you.
And Roger Thomas.
You're there.
Thank you. How nice. Thank you. That's very nice.
Now, this is almost unnecessary, but I will do it anyway. Steve has been intimately associated with hotels, resorts, and casinos in Atlantic City and Las Vegas since the late 60s. And his resume includes such names as Frontier, Golden Nugget, Mirage, Treasure Island, Bellagio, Wynn Las Vegas, Encore, Wynn Macau, and more. He's credited with bringing new life to the Las Vegas Strip in the 90s, and his resorts are known for their opulence and high-end luxury, and we'll be talking about that later. At his metaphorical side since 1980, I think that's 37 years, Roger Thomas, Executive Vice President of Design for Wynn Resorts, and his name has also been synonymous with opulence and high-end luxury. He has created signature product lines for many, many hospitality and home furnishing manufacturers, and he's renowned for his impeccable taste, his historic knowledge and sensitivity, and his appreciation of beauty. So again, welcome Steve and Roger. And since we're talking about Walters, I should add that these chairs are Roger's chairs from the Delta line, and they're the beta chairs from the Delta line. It's almost like a jingle. So, now that we have you here, guys, how did this crazy couple get together? How did you meet each other, and what were the circumstances?
Well, we're actually, in a manner of speaking, brothers. My father died when I was a senior at the University of Pennsylvania when I was just turned 21 years old, and I came to Las Vegas when I was 24, and I met Roger's father, E. Perry Thomas, the owner and chairman of the Bank of Las Vegas, to become later known as Valley Bank, and in effect became adopted by Perry Thomas. A relationship, a paternal relationship that started in 1966, 67, and lasted until he passed away in August of this past year. And as a result of being incorporated into that family, there were 4 boys and a daughter.
This 5 is correct. You're the 5th.
I'm the 5th son. And Raj was just a teenager. And Stephen and Peter and Tommy and Janie became my extended family. It was fortuitous that when Roger finished design school and went to work for a major design firm for Yates Silverman, I used them. And because of our pre-existing relationship since childhood. He joined me and took over the creation of these interiors and these hotels. I think this one that we're on now in Boston is number 13.
We were at dinner one night at a good friend's house for the ballet theater where Mrs. Wynn served on the board. And Steve said, "What are you doing?" And I kind of told him very proudly what I was involved in. He said, "I'm about to build the most spectacular hotel Las Vegas has ever seen." And he described a project that was never built called Victoria Bay. And my dreams started. And he said, "Would you like to come and help?" Well, the next day I was supposed to meet with Charles Silverman to go over the details of acquiring 50% of the company. And instead, I met with Charles Silverman and said, "I had an offer that if I look back on, I will always regret. Thank you for your kindness and your confidence, but I'm going to go work with Steve." And I did that day.
37 years ago.
And how
37
many years?
ago. April Fool's Day, by the way.
Seriously, really? You weren't a little scared about accepting it on April Fool's Day?
No, I thought that was pretentious.
Yeah.
Ever since then, we've been able to complete each other's sentences.
How long what was your experience in the business up to that point?
I had done mostly, I come from a banking family, as Steve said, and so I cut my teeth on designing banks. I thought the entire world revolved around Mies van der Rohe and international design. I had eschewed any knowledge of the history of design before 1950, basically. And when I went to work for Steve, I realized that I had a huge hole in my education. And I started educating myself about other times and other places, about why design happened and when it happened, why it happened. Why did the 18th century create the most comfortable furniture ever made until its time? Why was the sofa, the lounge chair, the everything, why did that get invented then? And because of that, I started learning the great lessons of Palladio, of Jacob, the chairmaker, of Senet and others. And I started investigating their secrets so I could be a better designer. And meanwhile, I was also learning about what guests wanted from Steve. I'd never thought about what a guest wanted. I'd always thought about what a designer wanted. And Steve insisted that I think like a guest.
Raj and I are both very proud of the fact that sitting here are our colleagues and my wife, Andrea. We're very proud and happy that they've joined this audience today. So it's a mixed blessing to me. I'm proud they're here, and so is Roger. But in my case, at least, it puts a lot of pressure on my natural inclination to exaggerate. I'll try and control myself.
I think we would rather welcome that. So what was the first project that you, since the April Fool's offer did not pan out, what was the first project you worked on?
My memory is that I started designing the rooms for Victoria Bay. But when Victoria Bay did not begin to happen, Steve decided that he wanted to apply some of the designs we had done for Victoria Bay to the Golden Nugget. So
That's right.
I think Golden Nugget, downtown Las Vegas,
was the first thing you took a swing at.
it is. And by the time Steve and I got done, clients for the luxury resort on the Las Vegas Strip, like downtown Las Vegas was considered then like downtown Las Vegas is considered now. And the problem was to change the destination for the guys that mattered.
We did a thing that we've done in reduced scale. We picked an outside designer that he and I would edit. In that case was Henry Conversano. And we're going to do the Nugget over. And we were adding rooms and doing all kinds of things, but we were going to do the Nugget over even before the first tower of rooms. And Bud Conversano came to work for us, and he was fun to work with. And Roger feathered in to that process. And by the time it was finished, he was in control of it. And Bud worked with Raj and I on the Golden Nugget downtown and the one in Atlantic City to our advantage. And by the time we finished Atlantic City, Roger had built the department large enough and with enough depth, including our library and librarians and all of that, that he had a group that was capable, in effect, of creating our own design studio within the company.
I think Henry Conversano and Steve also together taught me that in addition to a lot of other things I needed to learn about the history of design and the history of hospitality, I needed to learn about entertainment. I needed to learn that I was creating spaces of expectation, places where memories were to be created. And to do that, I had to do indelible things that became indelible to that memory and unique to that memory, so that if you wanted something of that elevated memory sense, that dramatic, wonderful, romantic sense of experience, you just have to come back.
Nice.
There. See?
Can you both take us back to 1980 in terms of what was the hospitality profile in Las Vegas like at the time, and how, I mean, it's changed dramatically, obviously, but in what major ways has it changed?
The history of the town has almost some comic relief to it. Remember, the founding fathers of Las Vegas were refugee, immigrant bookmakers and gamblers who had been around various parts of the country, skirting the edges of the law, having casinos and places where they could get away with it, but always craving, legitimacy, which they couldn't get except in Nevada. So in the 50s, they migrated out here and built the places that are legendary: the Sahara, the Riviera, the Thunderbird, the Flamingo, Frontier, Desert Inn, Sands, the Dunes, and the Tropicana. Well, and in the 60s, Caesars, which is another story that comes later. But in the 50s, these guys put up a few $100,000 apiece, cobbled together $1 million out of 20 guys who would act as investors and hosts. They knew the gamblers in every city, and they created these 200-room motels with a single-story building in front of them that contained a showroom, a couple of restaurants, usually a coffee shop and a gourmet room, what they called a gourmet room, and a casino with 25 to 40 games and 200 or 300 slot machines, and then a great big sign on the strip. And that was the 50s. The Sands with a tagline, "A place in the sun." And the Sands was the premier place, and all of them had a showroom, but the Sands had the best entertainers. Now, these guys had short money. The equity in each of these deals, the hotels cost $4 or $5 million. They borrowed $3 million. They put up $1.5 million or $2 million, which included the bankroll. And they started to have their places. Now, since normal financing was not available, they had to go get a design firm because they had to do the decorating. Who's going to be the interior decorator? And there was a guy in Los Angeles named Al Parvin who did two things. He would buy points in the place, which means he'd put up 30 or 50,000, and then he would also finance the interiors, which cost $2 or $3 million for these size places. And Parvin Dorman was a kitchen supply place. So Parvin Dorman, under the control of Albert Parvin, did every one of the hotels. They all looked alike. In other words, the bookmakers and the gamblers would say, okay, we're going to have a joint, the place going to call the Flamingo or the Sands or the Thunderbird. We'll get Parvin Dorman. They're the best at this. They didn't know another name. If you put down the top designers in the world, you might as well have done in Cantonese. They wouldn't have known a thing. They knew Parvin Dorman. He'll finance it, he'll take some points, and we'll get open and we can start dealing craps. That was it.
They had a banker on their board named D. Perry Thomas, too.
Perry,
yes.
the local bank was his father, who would provide $1.5 million mortgage. He was the only one, this Mormon from Utah, was the only one that had enough faith in these baggy pants characters. And Perry Perry introduced him to Parvin. So they had this formula. And design excellence or imagination was as foreign to these people as an island in the South Pacific. They had no sense of it, no priority, and no sensitivity. So we got into the 60s and the 50s with a monolithic, bright sign, boring, nobody in this room would have countenanced what these places look like with a red carpet, and that was it. So Jay Sarno showed up in the 60s. He and I had the same youthful, profound experience. In 1954, a guy named Ben Novak and his brother Joe Novak, who had hotel experience in the Catskills and in Miami Beach, and in Miami Beach, the Sans Souci Hotel, sort of like Las Vegas, a bunch of hotels lined up, one next to the other on Collins Avenue. Ben Novak and Joe Novak got an option on the Firestone estate at 41st Street on Collins Avenue, a big 15-acre oceanfront piece that was owned by the famous family that make tires. Ben Novak and Joe Novak, the two brothers who had a hotel in Catskills called the Laurel and the Sans Souci in Miami, conceived with an architect named Morris Lapidus of a hotel called the Fontainebleau. And this place was going to be a new idea. The hotel itself was going to be an experiential moment, a series of experiential moments that included formal French gardens, sort of a Jewish version of Versailles, gorgeous soaring ceiling, high ceiling lobby, a lot of curvilinear spaces and curved stairways, murals on the wall of 18th century France, a fabulous showroom, a shopping arcade below, and beyond the garden, an expansive cabana and pool club, a beautiful spa, and a curved building with blue glass. And the Fontainebleau was going to set a new standard of destination resorts on planet Earth. It was so breakaway, so profoundly new. It didn't even have a name on it, no sign, just the building. Well, it opened in 1954, and it changed everything. People came from France and Italy and Germany, from Mexico and Venezuela, Argentina and Brazil. And between Christmas and Easter, you had to know somebody to get a room. And everybody from Frank Sinatra and Johnny Mathis and everybody worked there. It was the coolest place to be in America during high season. The Fontainebleau dwarfed in scale and imagination anything that had ever been done anywhere in Europe or America. And it was received that way. Well, I was going to school at Penn. My folks had a home on Pine Tree Drive, and we had Cabana 364 on an annual basis. Jay Sarno was a character from Atlanta. He saw the Fontainebleau. He saw Ben Novak walking around with his beautiful wife. He saw that this place was, in the literary sense, romantic, better than the outside world. It was an universe, utopia within itself. Sarno never got over it. I was a student at the University of Pennsylvania, and I come there at Christmas time, and I never got over it. And to me, it seemed like the greatest thing in the world is to create a place that would transport people that way. Sarno went on to build a motel in Atlanta called the Cabana, and he came up with a gimmick with a curved concrete block screen that he put light behind, made a 20-cent motel look like a fancy place, dressed the girls up with push-up bras like Playboy, but did it all in theme, sort of tongue-in-cheek bacchanal. Then he built another one, even more ambitious, in Palo Alto, California, called the Palo Alto Cabana, in partnership with Doris Day and her husband. Well, if you saw the first drawing of Caesar's Palace, It's the Palo Alto Cabana. And Jay met Jimmy Hoffa, got $18 million mortgage, and did to Las Vegas what Ben Novak and Joe Novak did to Miami Beach. And it was off to the races of creating places that were themselves a show. Sarno and I, before he died, his daughters are alive and well and live here in town. One of them does. My wife's family is Novak. Joe Novak was her grandfather, and Andrea's great uncle was Ben Novak. Her grandfather died when the pool was being finished at the Fontainebleau. And Heidi Sarno lives and is married here in town. And Jay and I became friends, but he was a bombastic character, but creative and brilliant. And his idea changed Las Vegas. The original plan for Caesars also included a slot arcade called Circus Circus. The showroom was Circus Maximus. The slot joint was Circus Circus. It was going to have acts flying above it. Well, he didn't get enough money from Hoffa to build Circus Circus, so he put it aside. And when he sold Caesar's Palace, he built Circus Circus as a freestanding place at the other end of the street. And it changed the low-end image of Las Vegas. So it's interesting that for 20 years or so, the top-end place in this town and in the country was Caesar's Palace, and the mass marketplace was Circus Circus, both products of the imagination of one man. And then I sort of trip in afterwards with Roger, and that same sensibility that created the Fontainebleau. But we had access to money. You know, Mike Milk and Perry Thomas and Paul Laxalt made it possible for public companies in '66, when Hughes came, public companies to come into gaming. He changed the law with Paul Laxalt. Perry Thomas, Roger's dad, did that with Jerry Mack. And then all of a sudden, Las Vegas was open to legitimate financing besides the Teamsters, and big money showed up. And he and I were just the right age, in the right place at the right time. And pretty much everything that follows has its roots in that extended story I just told you. Wow. I hope you found it interesting.
Great. Roger, so these historical antecedents, were they weighing very heavily on you when you began? I mean, were you ultimately challenged by all of the things that he's described in terms of the trajectory of Las Vegas luxury?
Well, by the time Steve showed up, I was already bored with Las Vegas. I grew up the kid who, dinner at the Sands and watching Frank Sinatra perform, or Red Skelton, or Dean Martin, or Sammy Davis, or whomever at Uncle Jack's place, was not unusual. And I became, as I became more educated, I became aware that there was a thinness to Las Vegas. And when I met Steve, what captivated me about Steve and about that one talk we had about Victoria Bay is Steve valued quality. He wanted to give a depth of experience that hadn't been brought to Las Vegas before.
Like the Fontainebleau.
He didn't want fake marble or fake anything. He wanted it real. He believed that his customer could not be fooled. That quality spoke to a level in the soul that made you want to come back. And that fake spoke to a level in the soul that made you want to do it once. And I listened to that. And he offered me a chance. And he said this to me: if you want to change Las Vegas, why don't you come and work for me? Wow. And I wanted to change Las Vegas. Mm-hmm. That sounded like a really good idea.
And we were
I was bored with Las Vegas.
We were both educated because of our parents. We had the overwhelming advantage of college degrees. Our predecessors of the 40s and 50s were not such fortunate people. Right. They were self-made men from the fringes of legitimate business. We, on the other hand, were kids with silver spoons in our mouth. We had gone to the best schools. We had all the benefits.
We also had parents who said, do what you want to do, what your passion is. You don't have to do what I do. Just do what you love. I had parents who you would expect would have directed me to become a lawyer, a doctor, or a banker. And we had all of those in my family,
Right.
but I wasn't one of them. But they encouraged me to do whatever I wanted to do that would make me happiest.
And that's invaluable.
That was an extraordinary leg up in my world.
My story, slightly different. My father was only 47 when he died on the table in heart surgery when I was just about 6 weeks before I graduated from college. I was scheduled for law school. I would have ended up a developer anyway, but I never would have ever been allowed to come to Las Vegas had my father been alive. But all of a sudden, I was the head of the family in the bingo business in Maryland, and I could do pretty much what I wanted because I was supporting my mother and my brother and my wife. So I came to Las Vegas because of a freak event, a contingent event, the death of my father. Had my father been alive, there'd be no Mirage, Bellagio, Encore, Treasure Island, all that stuff. Somebody else would have done it, of course. But the signal event of a premature passing of a young man changed the course of my life. And Raj and I might not have had the chance to do what we did.
And what do you think you might have done had he lived?
Well, the day before my father died, I got accepted at Yale Law School. But I found out about that when I was in Minnesota at the hospital at the University of Minnesota, where his surgery was scheduled the next day. I ended up going to Georgetown for a semester or two, law school anyway. But I was running the family bingo business. And calling bingo numbers and briefing property cases a little odd. And I decided that I wanted to be a developer. I didn't want to be in the bingo business. I wanted to build stuff. And all of a sudden, I was free to do what I wanted. If I could make enough money with the bingo to give myself that freedom, and I did for a couple years. And then, by luck, I ended up in Las Vegas because of Bankers Life and Casualty and John MacArthur. And it's another story. But in terms of design, I mentioned that he and I are educated men. We had the benefit of these things. As a result, when we ask ourselves, we got a blank sheet of paper in front of us. It's the land under any one of these hotels we've mentioned. There you are. You're sitting at a table. Another fella named DeRuyter Butler, a woman that was his partner, Jane Radoff, in our family, and Raj and I. Okay, piece of paper. What you gonna do? Where do you start? Sky's the limit, piece of desert, go for it. Whether it's New Jersey or Las Vegas or Macau, Boston, what you gonna do? Well, now, there's the moment of truth. You can copy somebody. You could say, I want to look like Caesar's Palace, or you can say, what is really comes first? What comes first in our world is an idea. First an idea, then a hotel. First an idea, then a program in human resources or marketing or anything. And the idea, we sat, the four of us, talking about it. Well, what would make a person get on an airplane, travel a long distance, put up with the inconvenience of long distance travel, and want to come to a place the way people went to the Fontainebleau? Well, you got to have pretty strong medicine. You got to have a big, strong magnet for that. How to do it? Well, there's the moment, as I say. We came at this on a pretty organic way, having had the benefit of an education which included anthropology and history of art and architecture, since the Renaissance at least. For me, Roger goes back further than that. We said, if we want to resonate with human aspiration? We said that. Pretty puffy kind of sentence. What the hell does that mean? Resonate with human aspiration. That'll get it. Well, how do you do that? Well, we knew that life on this $4.5 billion year old planet really started less than 1 billion years ago in the Precambrian explosions 680 million years ago. And since that time, when multicellular life burst on this planet, life has been told, and the development of life on this planet has been told in a story of 2, 3, 4 competing forces. The energy of the sun through our atmosphere, water, and plants, 3, that make oxygen. Plants, water, and sunshine. So he said, aha, here's the beginning of our story. We now are at least grounded with those primordial forces of life, have to resonate deeply in the human soul. Whether people are conscious of it or not is irrelevant. But we all love sunshine and flowers, and we love water and things that, because innately we know they support our life, and they are what we all believe to be beautiful. That's why our buildings exploit sunshine, water, plants, and Roger's interior design, always organic, reflecting and linking and reaching to explore those things. And finally, women see everything, and then they tell men. Women are sensitive to detail and nuance, so we have always designed to the feminine sensibility. That's my version of the story. You can get his.
Do you want to amend or add to that?
No, I think one of the questions that because we got the questions before, one of the questions that you had before was what was our success? And one of those things about my success is that I have always carefully listened to Steve. He has this sense of what we need and want. I follow that sense. I listen to the master, and I've been blessed with an ability to solve the problems posed by those questions. But those big ideas, he never lets me walk in a room without a big idea. I can't walk in a room and say, the room's pink and blue and it's got this and that. What's the big idea of the room? This is a room of deep, dark, rich, smoky tones with lots of sparkle. That's an idea. The room is mahogany brown and it's got cut crystal is not an idea.
He's being humble. I got to say it because he won't. DeRuyter Butler and I sit with that piece of paper and we decide where the door is. We decide where the employees are coming. And then we try and visualize what is the statement it makes when you're standing out in front of it. And then we share that moment with him. Right away. He says, oh, I like that, or that sounds good to me. I say, now, what are we going to say to the people emotionally? We design to emotion, not to material. We don't care whether it's onyx or marble. We don't care if it costs 100 or it costs 1. Price, we don't design to budget. We don't design to material. We design to emotion. How does it feel? That's what we want to know. You know, Nelson Mandela said it. They'll forget what you said. They'll forget what you did, but they'll never forget the way you made them feel. We design to emotion. So I say to Raj, you'll come through the door and you'll see this, huh? What do you think if it could, what happens if we had a place where the season changes? People come here 4 times a year. Poincianas at Christmas and a big Christmas tree. Oranges and the colors of autumn. Springtime cherry blossoms. Red, white, and blue stuff in the summer. Suppose we had a season change.
And you get the conservatory at Bellagio.
But it wasn't a conservatory, it was season change.
It was season change.
First, the idea. When we bought the land from Hughes that is now Treasure Island and Mirage, my first chance to build in Las Vegas on the Strip from scratch, I was driving in those days, and I had a 280 Mercedes SL, the two-seater, powder blue, had the top down, beautiful day like today. The old Sands Hotel was there, a place in the sun, and its porte-cochere went out to the sidewalk, and the column that supported the outer tip of the porte-cochere landed right behind the sidewalk. It was directly across from the land that was the Castaways Motel and the empty corner that's Treasure Island. And then there was the Castaways, and then there was a souvenir stand, a mobile station, Gracie Hayes' house, another gas station, and a budget rent-a-car. And then there was Caesar's. I had not bought the frontage, but I owned the Castaways and the empty land, and I had apartments in the back that we had to buy. I had a lot of assembly to get 110 acres. But I was going to build a hotel, and I had bought the property from a guy that died last week, Hughes' nephew, Will Lummis from Houston. Looked just like Hughes, almost identical with the mustache and everything. Will Lummis died last week, but he was in charge of the estate, and he had sold me the property for $73 million. And the night before, I'd been watching TV with my wife, and Johnny Carson had Neil Simon on. And Neil Simon, who's a professorial guy, sort of like Mr. Rogers, soft-spoken, and he was promoting Plaza Suite, the movie. Johnny Carson said to Neil, whose nickname was Doc Simon, "How do you do it, Doc? How do you make that humor?" And Neil Simon said, "Well, Johnny, when I'm trying, I get my humor by exploiting conflict. The tension created in conflict is where I find wit and humor." Well, I was an English literature major at school, and I knew that was also true of tragedy. But watching Neil Simon talk about conflict being the source of humor and the power of conflict. The next day, I drove my little Mercedes out to the Sands. I knew the guys there, so I said, "Come and park right by the sidewalk." He said, "Sure, Mr. Wynn, go ahead." And I sat down on the left front hood of the Mercedes, right above the headlight, looked across the street at my property, and said, "What the hell would do it?" And I don't know why, but Neil Simon's voice from the night before was in my head, conflict. And I said to myself, suppose what you saw with your eyes was in conflict with what you knew you should see in your head. An idea started to form. The harsh southern Nevada desert, where very few things grow well in terms of plant life. Suppose you could see South Pacific, Bali High. I thought of the movie South Pacific, directed by Josh Logan. And there's a scene in South Pacific where Bloody Mary, played by Juanita Hall, is taking Lieutenant Cable, John Kerr, over to the Boartooth Festival on the island of Bali High, where Navy guys weren't allowed to go. And as the boat that's been commandeered by Lieutenant Cable is going over to Bali High, Josh Logan filmed the island of Kauai, where it was filmed in Hawaii, at Kauai. He filmed Kauai with too many orange filters, so it was steamy and sultry. And you hear Juanita Hall singing, "Bali High is calling, da-na-na-na." I said, suppose you saw South Pacific in the middle of the desert. Could we do that? That would get them. They would see waterfalls and cocoa palms. And behind it, we'd have a big atrium roof with clear glass to show that there was more inside. So if you're on a strip, you'd look through this tropical waterfalls and you'd see more inside. And it would beckon you like Bali High. And I got excited. I got it. And that's where Mirage came from. Now, if you see something in the desert that shouldn't be there, it's one of two things, a mirage or an oasis. So I knew what the name was going to be. Both of them were taken. I ended up paying a guy $250 to buy the Mirage, who had a motel on the strip. But, you know, it was an idea. Then I went and met Don Brinkerhoff, my landscape architect. I hired David Hersey, who did set design for Andrew Lloyd Webber, and a whole bunch of people joined Roger and I. I didn't think of the volcano, Hersey did. It was Don Brinkerhoff that designed that waterfall. It was Paul Steelman that helped me design the porte-cochere. And then Roger and Bud became that breakaway hotel interior. So if you're me, you're like a quarterback that calls a play. But the strength of the deal is how good is the team? There's got to be wide receivers and a great defensive line, an offensive line, and guys that run. The fun is putting the team together. Sure, you contribute an idea or two of your own, but when it comes to what you see on the Strip, all these hotels, Roger dreamt them up inside. Dee and I worked on the plan of the building. So on phase one, I'm a designer with, you know, the picture of the place. But in terms of what they feel like, 100% Roger and his team, and then the rest of us become editors. He shows us stuff. He dreams it up. He goes first, we react. It's fun being an editor. when he's the writer, it's fun being an editor. But that's our gig. That's how we do it.
That's great. I'm a little bowled over by the fact that you know so much about the cast of South Pacific. Is this typical of the kind of brainstorming sessions you have?
Always.
Yeah.
Always.
Today, we'll do it again today,
Yeah?
this afternoon.
Wow.
Every day, every week, on one project or another,
Wow.
for 37 years.
It's amazing.
Never stops.
In our industry, it amazes most of my colleagues that I have the access to Steve that I have, that I meet with him regularly, that I call him when I have a problem or a question. But Steve is as involved in the design of our hotels as I am. He knows as much about my profession as I know. He knows the entire vocabulary of my profession. He knows, well, I think he does. Although I do use a few words that he accuses me of making up. He says...
He's got this vocabulary, and so...
Can you think of one?
I'm going to tell you, before he does, he pulls this on me all the time. I said, what's that mean? And he says, I said, you made that up. I said, I could do it too. I'll make one up, a bourgeois. I said, so I made up a word, bourgeois. I said, I could do it too. You made up, tell them some of the words.
Guilloche was the first one.
So what's that mean?
Guilloche.
Meaning?
I said, you made that up.
A
Slightly
guilloche is a
gauche?
meandering line that creates a series of interlocking circular elements.
Of course it does.
That's what he does. See, that's what he does
on,
all
you
the
know
time. And he
Steve
never
says,
misses
"Spell
a
it."
chance. So
Marquetry,
I said, yeah, that's an...
enfilade, aglomisé.
Oh,
I
and
could
you
go
read-
on and on.
bourgeois, all of them.
Do these come out of your head spontaneously?
So the name of the language is Georgeois.
He thinks that way because he's formally trained.
Wow.
I mean, it's really true when he does it, but of course
His
it's intimidating
erudition,
if you're a civilian.
Yes, his erudition is famous. Yes, exactly. And you've always been gouache to be.
There's a thing that we start this process. I think this might be interesting to this crowd here today. We start this process on day one. It has been our practice, the two of us and DeRuyter Butlers, and Janie Radoff when she was with us before she retired, a wealthy woman. Janie, we start on day one the design, development, creative process. And we come up with an idea, we examine it, we get to know it, we render it, and 80% of it disappears after 3 weeks. 20% remains, and we keep adding, examining, re-examining, recross-examining, recross-examining, recross. And the fluff goes away, but little pieces remain, and those little pieces get bigger and bigger. And this design process takes a year, sometimes 2 years, before we're ready to bid the job and have a set of drawings that we can get even a preliminary price on. We don't mind that, see, because we love that year, that 18 months. We love the process. We're not hurrying off for cash flow. We want to do it right. And we love doing it. We're so happy we do it 8, 9 hours at a time, 4 or 5 days a week, month after month. Well, and the best part of it comes into season at the end of this process. And if you foreshorten it, you rob yourself of the prize. So if the process takes 18 months, let's pick a typical number. Then construction takes 3 years. Well, now we're 4.5 to 5 years away when the place is done. And the last part of it is the scaffolds go away, the construction workers leave, the vacuum cleaners are out. We've hired 8,000, 10,000 employees, and it is our practice to have 2 weeks of campus of training. The employees stay in the rooms, they eat in the restaurants, they play at the tables, we tray out the computers, we use our backup system, we absorb all of the little mistakes within our family rather than exposing the public to it. And during that 2-week period, the place is ours. It's finished, it's beautiful. We can see what we had done 3 or 4 years ago. The good news is we get to run around with dogs in the casino. We're eating in the restaurants. It's all us. The staff is staying in the rooms, all the employees, ordering room service, checking the joint out. Well, that's also when you see the mistakes. Because inevitably, when you're doing 6 million feet, and every inch of it's different from every other inch, the ability to visualize, we design in elevation, never in plan. The ability to visualize 6 million feet, every inch, every reflected ceiling, every wall surface, and we don't have walls that don't have at least 3 layers on them. When the human mind is only capable of a certain percentage of success. So invariably, Raj and I will walk around and see something we missed, or an opportunity that could have been exploited more powerfully. I'd like to give you an example of that. And it's the reason why we are doing another hotel now. Because both of us think if we could do one more, maybe, just maybe, we'll get it right. It was the week of the opening of Bellagio in 1997 or 8. The place was stunning. We had done it without a budget, had a lot of cool things in it. And I was with my dog Paolo, and I went out to have lunch at Olive's. I walked through the casino, went out through the Esplanade, the Via Bellagio, went to Olive's, had a nice lunch. I was coming back, and I stopped opposite the north entrance of Bellagio, where the escalators stairway goes down to Picasso and Prime. And there's a patio between the two, and it opens onto the lake out there, where the fountains are. And there was a cord across the stairs because we weren't going to test Prime and Picasso except during the dinner hour, not at lunch. And there was a security guard standing there. I think his name was Chet or Chris or something. And I stopped, and I had my dog Paolo with me, who was following me. And I wanted to see at the top, looking out on this above in this raised level that's the casino, were French doors with mullions, and outside a terrace with the Italianate balustrade. They're very much like bowling balls. It's a themed kind of balustrade like Bellagio. And then there was the stairway going down through the floor and the escalators. And I wanted to see from the top of the stairs if I could see the terrace between Picasso and Prime. And I couldn't. I could see the bottom of the stairs and the escalator. It was an 18-foot vertical drop from the casino level at elevation 86 down to the water, down to the restaurants. It's an 18-foot vertical drop. And all I could see was the bottom of the stairs and the escalator. And at that moment, I realized what a goof, what an opportunity we had missed. And I said, shit. And the security guard said, what's the matter, Mr. Wynn? I said, we made a mistake here, and I can never fix it. Damn it. He said, Mr. Wynn, everybody loves this place. It's going to be the greatest thing. Yeah. What I had missed, now remember, behind me is the North Porte Cochere. On my right is the casino. On my left is the Via Bellagio coming from the Strip, a major intersection by any means. In front of me is this $40 million lake with the water squirting up. If I had stopped the floor at the top of the escalator and made it a balcony, I could have had a 2-story glass window, and you could have come from any one of those 3 directions and had a big look at that lake diagonally, probably 1,300 feet of water and fountains. And you would have looked down on the terrace, and the invitation to the 2 restaurants would have been stronger. I missed it, and it drove me crazy. I said, damn it. It bugged me so much that I had to fix it. And if you stand at the top of Parasol up and you see now curved escalators going down to SW and that 2-story glass window, you will see that I got revenge on my mistake.
This is for both of you. Do you each have a favorite moment of your collaboration or your career? Doesn't necessarily have to involve the other, but something that remains singular in your mind.
Steve has just mentioned it. My favorite moment of my career is when the current project, and that can be an entire hotel like the Wynn Palace Cotai that we just opened together last August, or it can be the new registration desk that we're going to look at this afternoon at Wynn Las Vegas. Before everybody else gets to go in, it's pristine. Everything in it is brand new and sparkling. I haven't had shoe leather on the floor. No one's touched the passementerie on the drapery to see if it's real. No one's crushed the edge of the orchid to see if that's real. It's my room. And I get to go in it and see what my team, an extraordinary group of humans at Wynn Design and Development. I mean, this takes a cast of hundreds. You have to have great talent in every area on your team, as Steve said, or you're just a guy out there trying to make something pretty. But you have to have, it's really in-depth, and they all have to care. They all have to believe and want to make it the very best thing they can make it. And it's that moment that I get to see that they've succeeded.
It would be like Roger and I were a football team, and all we were was a quarterback and a center. He'd hike the ball to me, and we'd stand there, and get crushed. No, they're here.
They're here, a lot of them, and they are to be applauded.
And they come up with stuff. Once we call the idea. See, the good thing about an idea, I wish it was true in politics. A strong idea is something everybody can get their arms around. And a simple core idea that drives a project or a company or a government is something everybody can understand. And the job of the boss is to have the idea that's fundamental, strong enough, and simple enough that other people will say to themselves, that's right. That's good enough for me. I know that to be true. Not because he said so, but because I personally know it's true. And when you have that, then everybody's creative juices flow, but they flow in the same direction. We enjoy that cultural advantage in our family at Wynn Resorts. And the people that have joined us over the years have done so because they recognize that there is a fundamental cultural core to our group. We are driven because we buy into a common, simple idea as we face problems. If it's the hotel, it's guest experience. If it's design, we're going to resonate with human aspiration. When Raj dreamt up, I asked Roger at the Wynn project after Bellagio, competing with Bellagio was that was a no-budget project.
Steve said, when I did Bellagio, I want you to create the most exquisite, elegant hotel in the world.
But
Just that.
unlike
Just that.
Bellagio was Italian, Mirage was tropical, South Pacific. I said, Raj, suppose we do an interior. You dream up an interior motif, an expression, that people will say afterwards, we want to look like the Wynn. Our own look, not tropical, not Roman, not Italian. We want the Wynn look. He looked at me and said, I love that idea. I'll be glad to do that. I said, well, look.
I said more than that.
We're going to stick to classical elements expressed in modern and contemporary ways. And then a bunch of things started to happen between us that had to do with art and light and water and flowers.
And drama.
And drama.
Contrast. We decided together that all the lines in Wynn, Las Vegas, would have female silhouette. Because that's what everybody feels comfortable with. It's what we like to bump into. It's what we like to caress. It's what we dream about. Wow. Yes, does it cost more money? Absolutely. But one of the things that my team knows, if you want a team to really perform, you give them all of the right tools. And one of the tools when you demand the very, very best and the very highest quality is the right funding to achieve that. And one of the great weapons we have is I can go to Steve and say, I need just a little more, and he will be convinced. Or he'll say, you may need a little more, but don't put it there, put it over there. And that's his genius. But he never underfunds a project. I can always get there, I can always exceed expectations, which is one of the things our team is asked to do because we have the right tools.
I seem to remember you once saying the only person who can outspend an unlimited budget. Is that
I
correct?
have that reputation. Yeah. His brother Ken was the head of our company at the time, and Steve had come to me one night and said, we need to build some villas at the Mirage. I don't care what you spend on them, but they have to be the most incredible guest accommodations on the entire planet. And I know you can do that because I've allowed you to stay in the other incredible guest accommodations on the planet. They have to exceed all expectations. We did them in 9 months. Steve and I drew the plan of the Mirage villas, the first super villas in Las Vegas, that night, truly on a cocktail napkin. We used a couple of napkins. I think we drew one napkin, threw it away, and used another.
It was the placemat in the coffee shop.
It was a placemat. Okay, yeah. And we built those villas in 9 months. We had guests sleeping in those villas, and his brother came to me and he said, you went way over budget. I said, your brother told me I didn't have a budget. And he said, well, I had one and you went over it. So I exceeded an unlimited budget.
But for example, the way we translate things that we're familiar with, that we love, into design. I remember in the conception of Wynn, this hotel that opened at 05, that one. Roger's an art collector, and so am I. We both are big fans of painting and sculpture, and have had the benefit of being successful enough to acquire such things. And one of the paintings of mine was by Henri Matisse, and it was called The Persian Robe of 1940. In it, there's a woman with a beautiful striped kimono sitting next to a table, a round table with a huge bouquet of anemones. And since Matisse was the greatest colorist of the 20th century, there's this explosions of primary saturated yellows, purples, blue, green, and pink and red. And we were looking at the Persian robe, and I said, man, I love the way he did those anemones. Those colors float and vibrate next to one another. They scintillate, rather, next to one another. He said, I love Matisse's anemones, says Raj. And so Roger takes the concept of Matisse's colorization of those anemones, and this is what he does. He blows them up and runs them up a wall. He changes scale. He translates it to glass ceramic tile.
They became the whole floor of the entry of Wynn. Which the night before we opened Wynn, one of those magical moments, I was walking through, I was looking at these very difficult to achieve Venetian glass mosaic inlaid bouquets of flowers on the floor at an unprecedented scale. And I went home that night knowing that it was either one of the very best moments of my career or one of the very worst, and I wasn't really sure which. And I think that edge, I think getting to that edge is really important in what we do. I think, we do things that no one's ever seen before. We explore the unknown. And if you don't get to the edge, if you don't get to that, you don't really create that frisson. You don't get the drama of emotion, that tension that will be felt by everyone who comes in. That
when he said that we use the female form, the reason we liked the arabesque, the female form, it's curvilinear. The arabesque is a curve. We like that for the reasons that he said before, but it had an additional value. Again, I talk about the way things resonate with people emotionally, even if they're not conscious of it. The human eye processes visual information sequentially. That is to say, it follows lines. So when you make a curved line, people follow the curve. Well, think of it. If you visually in your brain follow a curve, that suggests movement and motion. And movement and motion are first cousins to excitement. So we like things that curve and move. Why we curve buildings. And we use dark backgrounds in the glass and white lines every other floor so that your eye follows the curve. When Deirdre and I were dreaming up the tower, we have that asymmetrical roof. We didn't do that to have a place to write the name. No. The asymmetrical roof was because the head of a comet is bigger than the tail of a comet. And we wanted the eye to look from right to left, boom. And so we put the end of the building taller. It turned out to be a convenient place to write the name of the hotel. But that was a secondary consideration to the notion of movement. Rogers, one of the great moments of Rogers interior design is if you're in the shopping esplanade of Wynn, you're coming from the strip from the west. Let's say you've been at Louis Vuitton or at Prada or one of those places. As you walk towards the casino, there's the atrium in the distance. We got a carousel of flowers. Chanel is on the left after Graff and Louis Vuitton. And he's got a series of columns that hold up the atrium marching around the corner. And he did them in a creamy marble with a tone-on-tone crosshatch on them, lattice pattern. And those columns march around the corner with the flowers on the floor and all the greenery of the atrium behind them. And it's a purely perfect design moment. It is one of my favorite spots at the Wynn, is to come from the executive offices or the shops and walk around the corner towards SW in front of Chanel and feel the movement of that space. Well, that stuff's exciting. People feel, and the casino's just beyond, and the clinking and clanking of the slots, and our choice of music, and all of a sudden, you're in a place, and you're moving. Isn't that what you came to Las Vegas for in the first place? And we're dishing it up. But he dreamt that up, and he combined those elements. And I remember when we took the bandages off and the construction guys got out, of course I had seen his plan. I was an editor, he shows me everything. The staff comes and presents one area and after another over a period of a year. But he saw that. But I appreciated and experienced it for myself just before the rest of you got to see it. And I said, hot damn, Raj, this is so cool. Look at this. And we're walking around together. And then there's these ceilings, the ceiling of the Esplanade at Wynn. If you're a designer, go take a second look at what Roger did with DeRuyter, with those glass oculuses that are at the intersections over the flowers. And take a look at the ceiling detail of Bellagio's Via Bellagio, step 1. We call that the practice hotel.
Right.
And
It's
then
better
take a
at
look at the ceiling detail of the shopping esplanade at Wynn. And take a look at what this kid did with that roof. Man, it is tricky. It is so cool. And I don't know whether people come and stare at and say, my, but people just love walking under it. I do to this day get a kick out of those things. I say, I'm so glad we got a chance to do that.
Wow.
Forever.
Well,
that we're part of it.
With that lovely story, we have to close. I wish we had another hour, frankly. I think I speak for everyone when I say your mutual admiration and respect and fondness for one another is palpable. It's lovely to see. And thank you very much for coming, and thanks again to Walters for their sponsorship, and have a great rest of the day.